When somebody wants to build something on his property and the people next door don't like it, their first reaction is probably to protest through the proper channels, organize a petition, call a meeting, march down to City Hall. But sometimes things can get out of hand. Tempers get frayed. There are shouting matches over the fence. Sourness and bitterness, and a minor dispute turns into a nightmare. But situations like that seldom get as ugly as the one that's been going on for 13 years in BC's Okanagan Valley. It's over Lake Okanagan's only island. To some, it's known as Rattlesnake Island. To others, it's Ogopogo Island, after the lake's legendary monster. But for one of the valley's residents, Eddy Haymour, it will always be Eddy's Island.
He saw all the two-bit real estate exploiters doing their thing, and he felt, that was the Canadian way. Why shouldn't he do it?
I think they were threatened by him. I think they were threatened by his style, his manner of presentation, the way he seemed to operate.
I think he was a nuisance to the community. He was larger than life. He was a thorn in their sides. He interrupted their visual notions of what the calm lake should be. He danced naked in the sand, and this the local people found offensive.
He came to Canada as Mohamed Yamour, a 24-year-old Lebanese immigrant with $17 in his pocket and not a word of English. With a job in a barber shop and lessons from the Fred Astaire dance school, he became Eddy Haymour, prosperous and popular citizen of Edmonton. Eddy did well in the free enterprising spirit of 1950s Alberta, and in time had a shopping center, a string of barber shops, and a closet full of tuxedos. He married his Canadian sweetheart and had 4 children. Eddy Haymour's proudest achievement was the $3,000 citizenship party he threw in 1960. 250 of the best people in Edmonton attended. Cabinet ministers, the mayor, even Alberta's lieutenant governor toasted the new Canadian who had done so well in so short a time. Eddy celebrated the country he had joined and remembered the land he had left. "25 years later, in British Columbia's Okanagan Valley, Eddy Haymour, now 52 and not quite as dashing, still hasn't forgotten Lebanon. Tonight he's just having fun. But there was a time when Eddy wanted to make the Middle East a permanent part of this Canadian valley. Eddy Haymour came to the Okanagan in 1970 and fell in love with the rugged hills and clear blue waters that reminded him of Lebanon. Here he found Rattlesnake Island, 5 acres of rock and scrub, but to Eddy, the site of his dream, a Middle Eastern amusement park. Within months, he'd bought the island and was promoting his plan on open-line radio shows and at the Chamber of Commerce. And he'd started to build. Everything from a miniature Taj Mahal to a 3-story camel.
Where are you going to put the camels?
Oh, the camels, everybody says the camels is really a cement structure of camel. A cement made out of cement.
Where was that going to be?
To be in the front of the pyramid there and have 39 flavor of ice cream for the kids in his tummy. So the children climb into his tummy and peek in from his eyes, and with the reverse telescope. Even they have the music in his mouth, and even the garbage disposal in his rear end. It's something that for adults to laugh at and for the kids to enjoy.
Was this the clever businessman in you who saw he can make a good profit?
No, I wasn't for a profit. I want a pleasure, and I want a heritage, and I want children of mine to enjoy two culture, my own and my children as a Canadian culture.
Moroccan Shadoo, he called it. a fantastic desert village with lake barges and a miniature golf course with mosques, minarets, and fountains. There would be a bakery in a pyramid and an ice cream camel. Even Ogo Pogo, the local lake monster, would have a place. To Eddy Haymour, it was a vision from the Arabian Nights.
Come on.
More like Coney Island, says Des Lone, a high school English teacher and potter in the orchard town of Peachland near Kelowna. His property overlooks Rattlesnake Island, and back in 1971, he felt strongly enough about Eddy's idea to run for alderman. He first met Haymour at a local meeting and suspected Eddy had his eye more on profit than pleasure.
He came here in a zoot suit right out of Alcap, and he introduced himself to the audience as, "I'm Eddy Haymour. I want you to remember that as more hay, more hay. That is more hay for you, more hay for me. We are in this together, and I'm here to make it for you." That's what he said.
And you thought?
I thought, how ridiculous can you get? That is, I thought, here we are with another exploiter.
So basically you tell me you don't like his manner, he was pushy, and he had bad taste in clothes.
Good, that's three parts of the operation so far.
That's a reason?
No, let's go to number 4. That in fact, these are all things that add up to a threat to the way of life of Peachland.
Peachland's quiet and prolific vineyards and orchards weren't ready for Eddy Haymour's flamboyant style and boundless imagination. The amusement parks that now dot the valley hadn't yet been built. On the island, there had never been any development. The local parks committee worried about green belts and natural order. Others whispered about belly dancers and gambling casinos. But it was Des Lone's letter to the MLA for Peachland, who also happened to be Premier W.A.C. Bennett, that really got things rolling.
If, in fact, this lake is going to be spread over with O. Henry chocolate bar wrappers and dirty divers and everything else that's going to come from transporting 600 people a day back and forth there, then that's pretty disgusting, considering the beautiful place that we have to live in. And if we don't respect that beautiful place and fight for it, then we don't have it.
Eddy Haymour was quick to start building on his Arabian Isle. Just as quickly, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs sent Haymour a telegram telling him he had to apply for a building permit. That was even before there was a regulation passed requiring such a permit. That came just before another regulation, the one classifying Haymour's 5-acre rock pile as suitable only for forestry and grazing. From that point on, the battle lines were drawn. Eddy Haymour determined to create his Mecca on the Okanagan, and the government just as determined to stop him.
My first impression when I had to deal with government departments was that they had possibly classified Mr. Haymour as somewhat of a threat.
Engineer Gordon Brookfield tried to help with a required sewage permit. He came up with a system he knew would work, but local authorities turned it down.
And at that point in time, I advised Mr. Haymour that he did not need an engineer at this point in time. He needed a lawyer.
What was their problem? Was it disposal sewage, or was it Eddy Haymour?
In hindsight, I think something was happening in other areas in the government which was a gang up on Eddy Haymour.
Gang up or not, Eddy kept going. Even a government lawsuit on Haymour's violation of building regulations had been unsuccessful. And in the summer of 1972, Eddy opened for one day. 700 people turned out, but a government official spoiled it all. He told Haymour he didn't have a permit to take people across the lake, and he wasn't going to get one.
That's a beautiful island over there, you can see, and I don't see how any development, tourist development over there, could interfere with anyone on the mainland here.
Former Peachland Mayor Harold Thwaite says Eddy's scheme was just a little ahead of its time. He doesn't think the government should have stopped Eddy because of the opposition of a handful of people.
What I did not like, and I'm a card-carrying life member of the Social Credit Party. I was a very good friend of W.A.C. Bennett, and I'm a good friend of the Premier today. What I did not like was that when when Eddy Haymour bought that island, it had no zoning. He bought it under the conditions he could develop it in whichever way he wanted. But when they got this opposition, then the government changed the zoning and ruled that it was to be zoned forestry and grazing. Now, there's no way you can grow a tree on that island, and it's 5 acres. There's no way you can graze on a lot of solid rock.
Ray Williston was Minister of Lands. He says no matter what the rules were, Eddy Haymour refused to play by them.
He really conducted business as though he was still in his native land and didn't acknowledge that there were different rules and regulations persisting in Canada, and he wasn't a very quick learner, nor did he want to learn. So he wanted to adapt us to his way rather than he adapt to our way.
Well, the various government memos that were circulated at the time indicate the government wanted to stop Eddy Haymour. For example, this one, October the 15th, 1971, and this was sent to you, Mr. Williston, says, I quote, "It's believed development had been stopped through the cooperation of the Departments of Health, Municipal Affairs, Water Resources, Highways, etc." Another memo dated February 72. It was a confidential memo stating government wished to prevent development of Rattlesnake Island.
That's right. That's right. And they issued these orders and so on and assumed they were going to be carried out. He paid no attention to them at all, kept right on building as though it was his land, and away you go. And sooner or later, that when he got it completed, the only thing the public could do was to approve what he had already finished. And that's completely wrong.
But Eddy Haymour never did finish. By the summer of 1973, his $150,000 Arabian village was abandoned. The only visitors were vandals. He was broke and alone. His wife and children had left him and returned to Alberta. Eddy stayed here in Kelowna. The story might have ended there, but he started making threats against those who had stood in the way of his dream. He talked of hijackings and bombings to a man he thought was a friend. Haymour now says it was all just talk, but his friend, who was an RCMP informer, felt differently, especially after Eddy returned from a trip to Lebanon to get help.
I said to him in these words, "Great, I brought with me 6 letter bombs." So that's the biggest mistake I have made. I should have said 6 letter as strong as a bomb. In reality, I have 6 letters written from heads of government in support of me.
He was arrested and sent to Ocala prison for psychiatric assessment. Only one of 37 charges came to trial, with the Crown trying to prove he was not guilty by reason of insanity. During the trial, Haymour sold his island to the government for only $40,000, thinking he might be released. But he was found not guilty by reason of insanity for the possession of brass knuckles.
Brass knuckles, yes. Aluminum brass knuckles would not fit the adult's hands. For children, I bought it for my boy. I bought 2 of them, 2 for $1.
For the possession of brass knuckles, they found you not guilty by reason of insanity.
Yes.
What happened to you?
Sent me to Crazy House for additional 11 months.
Well, my
Haymour's lawyer was Sidney Simons.
The trial was decided upon the basis of what would best suit the needs, the immediate needs of the community, not the legality or illegality or sanity or insanity of Eddy Haymour or his acts. But that seemed...
Soul, your body, store it away for 20 months, and for no absolute reason.
Eddy Haymour claims he's still trying to find the reason. For its part, the British Columbia government maintains it acted fairly. 5 years ago, Haymour sued them to get more money for the island. The case has not yet made it to court. In the meantime, Eddy's built a new life.